citizens have signed up to address the board. I will start with Monique Baruti, to be followed by Catherine Weber, to be followed by Robert Rigby. Ms. Baruti?
It's working. My name is Monique Baruti, and I'm an FCPS graduate and parent. I'm here to speak to you tonight about the Premier Workforce section of your strategic plan. Strategy number 8 states FCPS intent to recruit and retain high-quality employees who are valued, respected, and rewarded for their efforts. Policy 1501 states in part, the school board shall inform the community about policies, plans, and programs of the school system, and additionally, the school board shall invite and encourage the advice and counsel of county citizens. I've spoken a couple of times about FCPS' unwillingness to encourage the advice and counsel of county citizens regarding the changes to Policy 1450. But what I'd like to address tonight is your lack of engagement with one of your most valuable resources, your employees. They spend hours and hours every day with our children and have valuable input to provide regarding how this policy should be implemented. Unfortunately, you have failed to take advantage of this amazing resource and have chosen instead to alienate a large portion of them. When Policy 1450 was amended, the community was assured that nothing would change and that a consultant would be hired to help answer the many questions that were being asked about the implementation of this policy. Despite claims that nothing has changed and that the implementation of the policy is on hold, I can assure you that's not what we're experiencing as parents. I spoke to one FCPS employee regarding the changes to the family life education lessons that have resulted from the changes to Policy 1450. This employee was appalled to learn of the sexual acts they would have to describe to students as part of the new curriculum. This employee specifically stated, quote, "When I signed a contract to come work for FCPS, I didn't sign on for this." One would think that the consultant would meet with FCPS employees to get their input about how best to implement the new policy to make a safe environment for all FCPS students. Unfortunately, a search of the FCPS website and board docs for the consultant that was hired, Jeff Poirier, returns not a single reference. But a Google search of Jeff Poirier and FCPS results in a report by FCPS Pride about a meeting with Superintendent Garza, GLSEN, PFLAG, students, teachers, administrators, and staff on June 22nd of 2015, during which they were given Jeff Poirier's name as the consultant that had been hired and an invitation to meet with him 2 months later in August. Apparently, FCPS is willing to engage students, teachers, administrators, and staff on this topic, but only some of the community. It is no wonder that the spring 2016 employee engagement survey results showed that only 58% of responding employees are hopeful about the future of FCPS. You overwork them, underpay them, alienate them, and disregard the truly valuable input they have to share. I again urge you to repeal the changes to Policy 1450 and start down a path of true community engagement, encouraging the advice and counsel of county citizens and employees. Thank you.
Catherine Weber, to be followed by Robert Rigby, to be followed by Ben Nakhavanit.
Hello, I'm Catherine Weber, and I'm a Fairfax County resident, parent, and educator of 25 years teaching in public and private schools, and an FCPS graduate. I'd like to speak to creating a premier workforce and the various ways in which FCPS is instead promoting a hostile work environment. In the forced allowance of males to use female bathrooms, showers, and locker rooms without parental notification or consent, and in complete disregard for the needs of the vast majority of students, a hostile environment has been created. While 9 of 10 developing teenagers grow out of gender confusion if nurtured, supported, and counseled, chemical treatment and surgical removal of vital body parts is being promoted instead. Students have been coerced to recognize a false reality and science and deny the ability to object to the subjective whims of those in authority, creating a hostile environment. There's now promotion of soft porn and harmful behaviors in the FLE, and the immoral cultural indoctrination of children as young as 5 years old into a false belief that gender is irrelevant. Suspension and loss of privileges are threatened for any student not submitting themselves to the oppressive regulations outlined in the punishment guidelines in the updated SRNR handbook, obviously creating a hostile environment. Educators may now have to violate their conscience, moral and religious beliefs, scientific and medical understandings, and even their own professional judgment. Violations include First Amendment rights, coercion of speech, forced association of harmful behaviors, violation of religion, suppression of freedom of the press, possible teacher contract, and numerous federal and state work laws. Where is the love, compassion, and peace that used to be present in our schools? Where is the joy and the hope that these young people and teachers need and deserve? It has all been left behind. And now our young people are suffering from many things, including depression, high suicide rates, general loss of motivation, and hope for the future. Let's use our resources well to solve the problems rather than give in to the short-term solution of complying with passing trends. Because all that does is give FCPS low morale and a hostile environment for teachers and students alike. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Robert Rigby, to be followed by Ben Nakavandin, to be followed by Kimberly Begg.
So, vitae omnes. My students could all tell you what that means. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Rigby, and I am one of the Latin teachers at West Potomac High School. I've come tonight to encourage you to approve the addition of Latin 4 to our dual enrollment course offerings according to the recommendation of the Course Review Committee. Let me brag about our program here in Fairfax County. FCPS offers Latin language classes at almost all of our secondary and high schools and several middle schools. Thousands of students take Latin. Most of our schools have chapters of the National and Virginia Junior Classical League, and hundreds of our students attend and compete in the state convention in late November in just a couple of weeks. We even have our own quiz bowl competition called Kirtaman, in which FCPS teams excel, and many of our students take and win awards in the National Latin exam. Our students learn language structure, reading skills in Latin, ancient culture, mythology, and history, and read classical authors such as Caesar, Catullus, Virgil, and Cicero in the original. FCPS has one of the largest and healthiest Latin programs in the country. We are a shining star. Now for dual enrollment. Adding dual enrollment Latin 4 to our course offerings will enhance what we can offer our advanced students. For many students, dual enrollment has the advantage that they can participate in a rigorous, demanding, and instructive course throughout the year and earn a college credit without the stress of sitting for another high-stakes test in the spring. I am not suggesting that dual enrollment take the place of AP. Rather, it will offer an alternative for students who are overloaded with many tests for which they must cram in May. Students who do not typically do well on such exams will have the chance to demonstrate their achievement at a high level during the school year and still be rewarded for it. The proposed GPA boost acknowledges that also. The motto of my school, the world's greatest high school, is ad astra per aspera, which means to the stars through struggles. Dual enrollment Latin will enable our students even more to reach the stars. So, to take an oft-used quote from Horace, dum loquamur fugerit invida aetas, carpe diem. While we speak, an envious age will have slipped away. Seize the day and add dual enrollment Latin to our course offerings. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Ben Nakavandin, to be followed by Kimberly Begg and George Alber.
Evening. Thank you for having me here to discuss my views on Policy 1450 discrimination. I understand that Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in educational programs that receive financial assistance. The current administration has determined that this phrase is ambiguous and is in a unilateral move without the passing of legislation from Congress has interpreted to cover discrimination on the basis of both genetic sex and gender identity. I'm very disappointed that there's a huge disconnect between the citizens who have paid our taxes, like my wife and I, and the actions of the board regarding Title IX. We live in a democracy and have a constitution with checks and balances. 11 states have sued the federal government regarding Title IX. Just last week, the Supreme Court decided to hear the case. The Supreme Court previously issued a stay allowing the Virginia School Board to maintain its policy that protects student privacy in communal facilities. Before I came to this meeting, I looked at my tax payments just to remind myself of my vested interest in Fairfax County. The 2017 budget shows that schools receive almost 53% of the funds, $2.1 billion. By using our money, the members sitting on the board need to remember 2.1 billion times that you work for the tax-paying citizens like my wife and me, not the other way around. Therefore, it baffles me, Patty Hines, since you were the chairperson, how can the board rush to approve a policy which was adamantly not wanted by the parents? For example,
Mr. McCovenant, I need to remind you that you signed up to talk about Premier Workforce.
yes, and I have, I will get to have a minute and I have
Okay.
to go. For example, the board had received thousands of emails and there were armed police and security guards at your meetings because the community was clearly against you. Patty Hines even quoted that there's always people who have a difference in opinion about what we do. There are people in the community, particularly parents, who have questions about what it means for their children. That there's an obligation to answer those questions so that parents have the information that they need to understand what's going on in their kids' schools. I truly believe in that. If you think about what you said and your actions did align with the tax-paying citizens and the 2.1 billion reasons, then the citizens will not have those types of questions because we will understand your actions. In conclusion, I want you to think 2.1 billion times about the decision that the community wants and overturn your unwanted and illegal policy. Election day is next week. I want to remind you that some voters will use the meals tax as a referendum on your actions. And in reference to the qualifications of a superintendent, I recommend that person that you're looking for has critical thinking skills and can offer a different perspective instead of being a yes person. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Begg, to be followed by Mr. Albert, to be followed by Stella Morabito.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to address this board. I live in Herndon with my husband and our 5 children, ages 2 to 10. I'm a busy lawyer, we have a busy home, and yet I felt obligated to take the time to be a voice for Fairfax County's children. The selection of a new superintendent is a momentous occasion. I've been in Washington for many years and have seen what well-funded pressure groups can do. The effort to mainstream the transgender agenda has been incredibly successful, and tragically, many confused and vulnerable young people have been convinced that they were born into the wrong body. The activists have ignored the medical experts, like former top psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Paul McHugh, who says that to support the transgender agenda is to promote and collaborate with mental illness. Those pushing this extreme agenda convince young people to take controversial drugs and hormones, even to mutilate their bodies through surgery. Little wonder their suicide rate is 20 times higher than the general population. It's tragic. This board has received a letter from 4 associations of medical professionals urging you to stop promoting transgenderism in children. They are the American College of Pediatricians, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, the Christian Medical and Dental Associations, and the Catholic Medical Association. Together, they represent over 20,000 physicians and healthcare professionals. These are professionals who care about science, not political correctness. Truth does not become less true when a minority speak it, and falsehoods do not become facts when a majority believe them. Our new superintendent must care about science and truth, not political correctness. He or she should affirm the beauty in differences among our children, including the little boy who likes to cook and dance, and the little girl who likes to play baseball and climb trees. I was that little girl. Above all, our new superintendent must have the courage to fight for what's best for our children, even and especially when that means challenging the fashionable yet radical ideas of today's activists. Thank you.
George Albert to be followed by Stella Morabito to be followed by Laura Murphy.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight about early childhood education. I'm speaking tonight because I believe that all of our children should receive a free, high-quality, equitably funded education that includes affordable, high-quality pre-K, subsidized where necessary. Who among us would disagree? Who among us would disagree? As the county and school boards begin conversations about the fiscal year 2018 budget, we must ensure that this equitable access to preschool is a budget priority. The preschool access gap is directly responsible for a significant gap in kindergarten readiness, which follows our children all through their FCS careers. A strategic plan to close the preschool access gap within a short time frame with budget goals for each of the years must begin in fiscal year 2018. I call on the superintendent and the school board to work with the Fairfax County government to make closing the preschool access gap a top strategic budget priority this year and every year until all of our children enter our schools prepared to succeed. Each year, almost 1,000 Fairfax children qualify for Head Start that end up on the waiting list because there are not enough classrooms. Not fixing this is consequential. For example, think about the achievement gap. Achievement gap is a high priority in the FCPS strategic plan, very high priority. But student outcomes continue to show stubborn socioeconomic gaps. The most recent report, despite all this effort, on FCPS state test scores and on-time graduation rates still show no appreciable gains. And yet, we ask ourselves why these gaps are so stubborn when we have in front of us a powerful tool to address this gap, equitable access to pre-K. It is possible to close that gap, but we must all put a high priority on it. Preschool is the best investment we can make in the public sector. Decades of research show that every dollar on a high-quality pre-K saves $7 later in reduced remediation, higher on-time graduation rates, lower incidence of crime, less teen pregnancy, better lifetime health and employment outcomes, and on and on. So I call on you to provide the funds, not just the plan, but the funds, beginning in the 2018 budget year to close this gap. Let's target our dollars and our efforts toward these neediest of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Stella Morabito to be followed by Laura Murphy to be followed by Meg Kilgannon.
Hello. My name is Stella Morabito. I'm a writer, and I've been a tax-paying resident of Fairfax County for several years. I've also studied totalitarian systems, and I served for several years as an intelligence analyst with a focus on propaganda and media analysis. So I'm speaking tonight because I believe most of what we're dealing with in this policy 1450, the gender identity policy, is political propaganda, pure and simple. For me, that's the biggest issue. Propaganda like this is really dangerous. It's basically what it is a program that manipulates people through psychological conditioning. The goal is always groupthink that empowers elites and disempowers just about everybody else. And what interests me most is how violently this policy disrupts the actual structure of our language.
I'm sorry, again, I need to remind you what you signed up to speak about tonight.
The gender identity policies.
According to my list, you signed up to talk about consideration of approval of SAC recommendations. We didn't have gender identity policy on our agenda tonight.
Well, it's all connected. And
I hope you'll make the
definitely connected with the whole thing. I think when we're dealing with any of these kinds of policies, it really does assault language. It assaults people's ability to communicate, and especially with the silencing tactics that are inherent in these policies, the punitive measures, when a student maybe has to, go along with certain things. It's a very old tactic. It's called divide and conquer. And manipulation of language is key in all of this. I am going to have to go back to gender identity because it's based on a premise, the whole policy that is up for definitely up for discussion continually, includes a premise that sex is assigned at birth. And it's a false premise that is built into school policy and into all these programs. And it forces everybody to deny their own physical reality. It applies universally. It desexes everybody. This is mind hacking, and it's mind hacking on a grand scale. And I've got a little note from George Orwell on that sort of thing. If thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. And I think in every policy that has to be considered. A bad usage can spread by tradition and imitation, even among people who should and do know better. So, it's a very hostile environment for learning that's being created by that policy, such policies. It's anti-conversation, it's anti-friendship, and I think if we know what's good for real learning, we won't vote for it. Thank you.
Laura Murphy to be followed by Meg Kilgannon, to be followed by John Kochka.
Members of the school board, Dr. Garza. All families, including those in the Head Start program, deserve assignments reflecting reasonable standards of decency and appropriateness. A FCPS teacher wrote the following: "This brings tears to my eyes. I want you to know that I forwarded your emails to my administrator and to the English department chair. They need to know. They need to know that after 27 surgeries and confined to a wheelchair for the past 18 years, this high school junior has endured many obstacles and challenges. After diagnosed with spina bifida at birth, this family understood that everyday life would be different for their son, but nothing can prepare them for what happened this past summer. In early August, this high school junior consulted a FCPS summer reading list. The review of one particular book appealed to him. This is a story of friendship and acceptance and testing strength in an uncertain future. The main character in The Last Leaves Falling suffered from ALS, and with the help of his online friends, did the world a favor and ended his life through teen-assisted suicide. One boy responds, 'People like that should effing die. I mean, what's the point? He should just end it. He's taking up our space, breathing our air. There's too many people draining our resources. They should do us a favor.' While this junior never considered his life to be a burden, after reading this book, he began to second-guess himself. His mother writes, 'My son was a mess when discussing this book. The character in the book ended his life because he was a burden to his mother.' After many tears, his Fairfax mom told her son that's not the case with him. He never thought the burden on us before seeing it in this book. He thanked me so sincerely today for all we do for him. It broke my heart to hear him all but apologize for the extra things we do for him. I fear exposure to this book will always make him question that now. I'm off to return this book to the library and be done with it. We need a happy book and ice cream." While the book did illustrate the value of friendship, it left the reader with a distorted view of human life and children with disabilities. To their credit, staff took action and offered an acceptable solution, only this solution was not county-wide. Fortunately, there's an epilogue, only not by the book's author, but by this amazing young man. He just completed the Army 10-miler in a wheelchair with his proud mother and father behind. He also received a national record in shot put and participates on the Fairfax Falcons Wheelchair Basketball League that's ranked 14th in the nation. I shared with this mother, this is the story that all FCPS children should be assigned. Whether books include teen-assisted suicide, sexually explicit material, or excessive violence, parents and students, at a minimum, deserve warning. Let's be clear, this is not about censoring or banning. It's about notifying. Regulation 305 included high school only because FCPS never imagined that books containing these topics would ever be assigned to middle or elementary school children. Please, amend the regulation and make it apply to grades K through 12. Carefully vet each and every assigned or recommended book. Identify books containing sensitive material. Offer an acceptable alternative, and finally, restrict those books that don't comply with reasonable standards of decency and appropriateness. Our students deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg Kilgannon to be followed by John Kochka.
I'm going to yield my time to Nasser Katir.
All right. When you're finished, would you please give your information to our clerk so she'll have your
Sure.
full name? Thank
No
you.
problem. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak my voice tonight. My name is Nasser Katir. I came here tonight to talk about secondary school courses offering. As things are now, my family will not be able to enjoy high school in Fairfax. I came to this country 30 years ago from the Middle East, and I'm a Muslim. I'm a citizen of the United States right now, thank God. I heard a lot about America, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Interested to come here. Until recently, I was a single income. My wife had to get a job for $8 an hour in a restaurant to be able to support the family that her and I are running. Last year, I heard about policy 1450. I had to quickly take my kids off to a private school. This school is charging me a lot of money, charging me $140 for a very simple jacket with a logo. I have a $70 for the pants. Nevertheless, I have two aunts lives in Syria. Half of my family, my mom's side of family, butchered by Assad. The other half is a refugee in Jordan. I support my mom in Aqaba, Jordan. I support my wife's family in Lebanon, southern Lebanon. I'm really speechless, but I want to really talk about policy 1450. I decided to move to Fairfax County because it offers the best standard of living and the best education. And thank you so much for what you guys are doing. I really appreciate that. Now I kind of regret doing that because of that policy. I pay top dollar for my house. I commute. I suffer like everybody else here. 45 seconds. I just want to say the public schools are for everybody. Not for me right now. I have a son, a 5-year-old son in kindergarten. I don't know what's his future because I really can't offer to send them to private school like my other two twin daughters. But I say public schools are for everybody. I want to ask everyone here who gets to decide whose right or belief matters the most in Fairfax County. I just want to say 4.6% of Fairfax County are Muslims. They share my same views. This policy completely against my religious beliefs, and I would like that I consider my First Amendment right as a citizen. I would recommend the repealing of policy 1450. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John Kochka.
The best way to encourage a premier workforce is to teach our kids to tell the truth. Are they credible in a job interview? Do they do what they say? The big lie by this school board happened on September 23, 2015, when I sent John Torrey of the Fairfax County Public Schools a Freedom of Information request asking, please send me all the discrimination complaints by transgender students in Fairfax County prior to May of 2015. Brandon Rees wrote me on October 13, 2015, stating, there are no responsive documents to your request for copies of any discrimination complaints by transgender students in Fairfax County. Fairfax County Public Schools does not track the number of students identified as transgender. An informed source told me there are less than 20 transgender students in the entire Fairfax County program, 186,000 students. On May 7, 2015, members of the Fairfax County School Board claimed that Policy 1450 was paramount for the protection of transgender students who were routinely bullied. Mr. McElveen, Mr. Moon, Ms. McLaughlin, and 6 other board members deceitfully built a straw man of bullying as a justification for Policy 1450. After Policy 1450 was passed on May 7, 2015, the Fairfax County Public Schools hired Jeff Poirier to draft regulations during the summer of 2015. Mr. Foster, who were the Fairfax County purchasing agents negotiating Mr. Poirier's contract? Ms. McLaughlin, can you produce a written request for proposal, and when was it issued? Mr. McElveen, what criteria were used to evaluate Mr. Poirier's proposal? Ms. Hines, as required by Virginia Contracting Code Section 2.2 through 6, please provide proof that 2 or more offerers existed and were interviewed for this work. Ms. Corbett Sanders, where was the public notice for this request for proposal? Ms. Koufax, who were the final 2 bidders selected under Section 2-2 through 1132 for negotiation? Ms. Strauss, can the board produce a copy of Jeff Poirier's contract? Ms. Evans, how much was Mr. Poirier paid? Ms. Evans, what did Superintendent Garza know, and when did she know it? I find it troubling. Our elected officials cannot answer simple, straightforward questions about their activities, how they recklessly endangered our children and spent our tax dollars. 9 members of the Fairfax County School Board have willfully and habitually lied to the public. They used unethical contracting practices to present a consultant who worked for the Obama administration and the Clinton Foundation. I strongly recommend these solons of sodomy follow the leadership of Superintendent Garza and resign immediately. They're unfit to serve.
Thank you. We turn to 3.02, Student Representative Matters.
Chairman Evans, I'd like a point of order.
Yes?
I do think it's very important that the audience, both here in the auditorium and those at home, should at least have a factual statement from this board, which is that the board has taken no action at all about any draft regulations on 1450. So the presentation that any of us have approved contracts, that we've withheld information from the public, I think it's really important that we at least be clear on the record, because while I do support and appreciate citizen participation, we need to make sure as a board that the public at least understands that if there is misinformation out there in the public, we need to help clear that up. There has been no action by this board. We have not drafted as a board any regulations. Whatever work the superintendent has done, she operates the school system.
Ms. McLaughlin, I appreciate that clarification.
All we've done is updated a policy that we don't discriminate.
Again, this is not on our agenda for tonight. I know a number of members of citizen participation spoke to that policy, but it's not on our agenda to discuss tonight.
It's not that it's on our agenda, but I do think, Ms. Evans, we have a duty and
I think we need to move on, though.
To at least make sure that the public is clear about what's factual and what is perception.
Ms. Chu?